In the fall of 1665, the tiny village of Eyam, England, made a terrifying choice. They knew that what they were about to do would likely mean death for many of them, but they did it anyway. And in doing so, they may have saved the lives of thousands. So what was this choice? Well, let's go back to the beginning. In the summer of 1665, London was in the middle of a plague outbreak. The Great Plague had already claimed hundreds of lives, and it didn't look like it was going to stop anytime soon. So to try and get ahead of it, the English government began to look for places to quarantine the sick. They settled on several villages in the countryside, including one called Eyam. At the time, Eyam's population was around 800 people. And when the government officials showed up to tell them they were going into quarantine, the villagers didn't really understand why. They had only heard rumors that there was some sort of sickness going around in the big city, and those rumors had reached them via a different route than the one the government officials took. So the villagers were genuinely confused when they were told that they couldn't leave their town or let anyone else in. But after some convincing, they agreed. And then the government officials left just like that. No one from the village had any idea how long the quarantine would last, if they'd be compensated for their lost wages while they were stuck in the village, or even if they would receive food. All they knew was that if they let anyone in or anyone out, they could be fined heavily or sent to prison. This meant that if someone had to go to the market in a nearby town to get supplies, they wouldn't be able to. Or if the miller had to go to the market to sell his grain, he wouldn't be able to either. But the villagers didn't complain too much. They knew that what they were doing was for the greater good. And luckily, it didn't take long for them to realize that staying in the village was a lot less dangerous than going to London. While the plague never hit Eyam particularly hard, killing only around 200 people, the same could not be said of London. By the end of the plague, an estimated 100,000 people would be dead. When the quarantine was finally lifted in 1666, the people of Eyam were understandably very relieved. They'd done their part, and now they could get back to normal life. But sadly, that's not exactly what happened. Because while the people of Eyam were indeed very much done with the plague wasn't done with them yet. As if to prove it, just weeks after the quarantine was lifted, several people from the village began to show symptoms of the disease. It turned out that a few villagers had actually been infected with the plague while the quarantine was in effect, but they hadn't shown symptoms until well after it was over. This meant that once again, the village of Eyam was quarantined. And once again, the villagers had no idea how long this would last. But unlike before, they weren't willing to wait around to find out. As soon as the quarantine was announced, people began to flee the village. Some hid in nearby caves. Others went to stay with friends or relatives in other towns. A lucky few were able to make it all the way to London, where they hoped they would be safe. But unfortunately, they weren't. Because while these villagers may have avoided infection the first time, they were much more vulnerable the second time around. And as a result, several of them died. In total, around 200 people died in the second outbreak, which was actually higher than the number of people who died in the first outbreak. So while the people of Eyam did their best to fight the plague, it seems like they were never really able to stop it. But here's the thing. While they may not have stopped the plague, they did save England. See, while the plague eventually killed 200 villagers, it only killed around 100 people in each of the nearby towns. And London, well, it killed an estimated 100,000 people there. So while the people of Eyam lost their lives, they likely saved thousands of others. And it's because of their sacrifice that we should all remember them today. Hi, everyone. If you want to learn more about the Great Plague, I've included a link to a playlist of videos about it in the description below. Also, a huge thank you to my supporters. I'll see you next time.